Hello, I'm joined by Victor Allis, one of the developers at ActiVote, and you are here to talk to us all about the app that you have been developing. And first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time. Not only are you talking to me today, we also recorded this previously and we had a problem with the audio, and you spoke to me before explaining the app, so I appreciate all the time that you've put in to be here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
That's quite all right. So just a few words about the app itself. So it's only available in the United States, as far as I'm aware, for the meantime, but I understand that you are in the process of developing a web-based kind of alternative. Is that right?
That's right. And the exciting thing is it will come out this September. So before the end of the month, it will be available on ActiVote.com. So anyone who's interested in American politics but doesn't live in the United States can then still try it out.
That'll probably be me. So one thing that I would like to clear up first and foremost is that there's no sponsorship or any money changing hands here. I'm just here to talk to you about the app itself because I think it's good and I think it's something that you people watching at home will find some uses out of. So brief word about how we got in touch with one another. So me and Hugo here covered political compasses in one of our weekend episodes, and we had lots of gripes about conventional political compasses, and then we were directed towards the work that you were doing, which they suggested solved a lot of the problems that we had with conventional political compasses, and I think they were right to do so. So first and foremost, of course, the app does lots more than simply have a political compass, but we'll get into that in a second. But the first thing I'd like to look at is the political matrix and how this actually works. So I understand that you've taken a very different approach to conventional political compasses. And if you don't know, I'm sure most of you probably are familiar with political compasses, but it's just a visual representation of different political beliefs. So it'll be kind of two different axes crossed together where you can see yourself positioned relative to other people. And one of the main problems with the conventional ones is that it's kind of top down, and in that someone has an idea about what specific people believe and then they mapped this onto the compass, whereas you did it the other way around and you fed lots of data in to work out the different positions. I believe that's more or less what you've done, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the origin of that is I'm a computer scientist by original training, and I don't have a degree in political science or anything like that. So when I thought about the political matrix and have as a goal to say that if two people believe, say, similar things, you want them very close to each other. And if people are very different in the political beliefs, you want them far away from each other. I was wondering whether the data itself could just tell us where those people should be positioned without anything like left and right and libertarian or, global focus or socialism or whatever term you wanted to use, conservative, progressive. I didn't want to use any labels. I just wanted the data to tell me where should we position this. And so what we basically did, we collected a whole lot of data about answers that people give, and I can tell a little bit more about that. And then we basically fed it in a data science algorithm, and it plotted people in places in the matrix. And then we realized that it kind of did exactly what we hoped. And some people responded to it saying, yeah, that's where the libertarians are. But it wasn't because we said that's where the libertarians should be. It was just because a lot of people that had similar beliefs kind of occupied a certain part of the matrix. And the reason we like this approach is there's no bias in there. It's just what the data is telling us. And people over time actually move a little bit through the matrix if they answer more questions or if the political winds change. So that's basically the background of what we did, and it seems to work really well.
And I think it's also worth noting the actual data that you put into the matrix is all about the policies specific to the United States rather than just your ideological beliefs. And one of the problems that I know we had when we were talking about political compasses in general in the thing that we did for our weekend show was that some things were very US specific and some things applied elsewhere. And if you're taking it in a specific country, it's got to be related to the country in question, of course. And
Yes.
you feed the policies into the matrix based on members of Congress's voting patterns, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so there are two things that we do. So on the one hand, we take this approach with all the votes that people in US legislators have taken. So that's on the one hand, Congress, which is of course, the federal legislature, and also in the 50 states. So we have also the state houses and the state senate. So there's a total of about 8,000 or so current members of those legislatures. And they have cast thousands of votes, often individually. And so what we basically do is we take all their votes and how they align by having the same vote on the same bill or where they're very different. And that is one way that we plot information in the grid. There is a second way for people who are not voters, or people who are not part of those legislative bodies, but individuals like you and me. And that is we have 380 or so policy questions that are in the app. And it's, any topic that you can think of. Let's take abortion for the moment as an example. So there's a question about abortion. And then people can give 5 answers that basically span this spectrum that on the one end goes like, anytime, all the way to never ever. And the same thing we have for minimum wage, like there shouldn't be any, or it should be, really high. And nuclear energy and anything you can think of. And what the algorithm then does, it tries to figure out, based on all the answers given by everyone, what it does to your position in the matrix. And in many cases, we find things that are logical, but sometimes also very surprising. So for instance, on the abortion question, you can imagine that many people who identify as more conservative typically say more, well, shouldn't be allowed, and many people who are more progressive get an answer that says it should be more left to the individual. But for some questions, you could say, well, I'm not sure if you ask a question about trade, that has changed over the last few years. Or a question about nuclear energy is also very interesting. Normally, the more conservative statement was, well, we should be for, and more progressive was against it. Now with global warming, it's, well, but maybe nuclear energy isn't CO2. And so what we found, for instance, is that the nuclear energy question is one of the least predictive right now about political leaning. And that's not something we said, that's what the data say. So the algorithm figures out, based on what's happening in a country, what all the people in that country think, and then determines in how far a question is pushing you in a certain direction in the matrix. And we like that, because if the winds change on a certain topic, then the effect of that question in the matrix will also change. So I don't have to go back and redesign the matrix over time. It's automatically done by the data.
And I think that is a real advantage of this approach to a political matrix, because, of course, you mentioned this yourself, that the kind of Republican attitude towards trade changed over the years. In the past, of course, it was very much free markets, but under Donald Trump, it turned a bit more protectionist, which,
yes.
And you're able to track that and judge people relative to the political climate of the time, rather than just the time in which you created the matrix.
Absolutely.
So this is only one thing that the ActiVote app does. Of course, you have the political matrix, which you answer all of these questions to figure out what your position is and who you are most aligned to. But it also tells you what your upcoming elections are, which I think is very useful, because even someone like me who follows politics every day, when it comes to things like local elections, sometimes it's difficult to know what the key dates are, and the app reminds you of that. And also, I believe it ranks the candidates relative to how close they are to your own position on the matrix. Is that right?
Yes. So just so within the United States, there's about 250,000 elected offices, from your local mayor or school board all the way up to president. And elections are all over the country on different dates. So what the app basically does is, you indicate where you live, it will link you to all the elections that you have. And I live here in Boston, And our next election is in less than 2 weeks on the 14th of September for our mayor and city council. And so one of the things it does is for everybody who has either a legislative record or who has participated in ActiVote, their position in the matrix is visible. So we cannot see what they answer to individual questions, but we can see where they ended up. So we can see for some of the city councils whether they're very progressive or more on the conservative side of the matrix where it ends up. And I can see for myself in the app where I am. So when I want to vote for city council, the first thing I do is I look up my election, which it says, is soon. And I can click at the matrix that shows all the people are running in this particular election and myself. And it might help me zoom in on some of the candidates that I like. And that works all around the country. So if you're in Oklahoma, you can see whatever elections are there. And for your candidates, you can see how you align with them. And so we hope that anyone who has the app, gets notifications as hey, in 7 days, it's time to vote. And they might look up their candidates. And as one of the things you can look at is, are these people having the same values and are they in the same kind of place in the matrix that I am? And we think that that's helpful.
And I think that is a really useful thing because, of course, it's a difficult thing to keep track of and it's not always well advertised, however much governments and local officials try to disseminate that information. And I also understand that the app helps you plot your habits kind of parallel to a bit of a Duolingo for politics, in that it prompts you to learn about certain policy areas and things of that nature, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the way we thought about it is that many people once every 4 years, or in some other countries maybe different frequency, suddenly realize that they need to have an opinion about politics and politicians before they cast their vote. And it's very difficult to then think about all the things that play a role. So what we try to do is make democracy a daily thing. So the app basically every single day comes up with a new task, which is personalized. So if you have an election coming up, the task may be for, hey, how about you look at your candidates to figure out who you are going to vote for? And maybe you want to rank your top 3 candidates so that you are reminded, oh, these are the people I'm thinking of voting for. But other tasks are saying, hey, there is a Massachusetts State House bill that is coming up for vote. What do you think about it? And that's a moment for you to prompt, oh, I didn't know about that bill. Let me read about it, because then, of course, the summary of the bill is also in the app. And similarly, the almost 400 or so questions are there. They will pop up once in a while saying, hey, so what do you think about nuclear energy or about this topic? And what we have found is that there's quite a few people who realize that maybe there are 30 or 40 of the questions that we may ask, and they are about trade and abortion and minimum wage, etc., that they all know about. But what do you think about qualified immunity? What do you think about the earned income tax credit? What do you think about the estate tax? And many people go like, oh, I actually don't know. And so we have a relatively small text, typically 200 to 300 words, that basically explains this is what the topic is about. Then we summarize 2 of the more common opinions on both sides of the aisle, and then they get 5 answers to choose from. And it's that interaction, which is 2 or 3 minutes a day, that make people think, oh, I didn't know that. That's actually interesting. And our goal is to provide just the information about it and then give them choices all across the spectrum to choose from. And it is a wonderful way to make democracy a habit, a daily thing you do. And we have seen quite a few people comment that they said, hey, after I used the app for several months, there were so many areas I kind of didn't know about that it existed, but now I've learned about it and they enjoyed it. And they feel like more informed voters, which at the time that election then comes up, helps them make a more informed choice.
And that's obviously a very, very positive thing, and something we need more of, I think, is people actually knowing what their beliefs are, having looked at things and then being able to express that in the polls. And of course, most people probably don't have the opportunity to look at the finer points of different areas that may not necessarily impact their lives. And it seems like a quite a good way of keeping on top of learning about that, because it's very difficult to learn about things that you're not even aware of existing in the first place. And
right.
Having something that prompts people is obviously very useful. And I do understand as well that you collect polling data from some of your users. So you give them opinion polls, and then you collect that and present it in kind of like a digestible news format. And I was having a look at a few of these on your website, and it's things like you had something about the infrastructure bill, and you had something about trade unions, and you had opinions about Kamala Harris's performance, and you break down the data and what kinds of people. I think you had maybe an age breakdown on the Kamala one, and a racial breakdown as well. And there's some interesting things that I learnt from particularly the Kamala one, where I was very surprised by a very high disapproval rating from Latinos who had used your app, and I wouldn't have necessarily have thought that going into it.
Yes, so the first and foremost, what we find extremely important is that the data people enter is completely safe and is not shared with anyone. So there's no individual sharing. But if 10,000 people have answered the question about the federal minimum wage, and they have identified themselves as being, a certain voter of whom we know that they're maybe a white female living in Middle America or so, then when we have those 10,000 answers of all those people, and we know what the makeup of a US society is, then we can use that to calculate, so what does America think about this? And what we have queried from people is, do you like that? And they say, oh, that's great. I love to be part of a poll. I don't want to tell my neighbors what I think, but I would love to have my voice heard in polls this way. And so what we do for all the questions that we ask it, when it is relevant, like Afghanistan or trade unions, when something comes up, we take the data, we just run the poll on that based on all the answers given by our users. And we're then able to write a poll where everybody knows that because they participated in the app, their voice is heard in it. And we do find that often the outcome is a little bit more, say, centrist than the people on both sides of the spectrum make us believe. So, for instance, we published a poll on the federal minimum wage, and there was on the left side a lot of rhetoric that more than 50% of the country supports a $15 minimum wage. And the answer is no, that's not true. There is a plurality who supports a $15 minimum wage, and there is a majority who supports a raise in the minimum wage from the value it is right now. But there's not a majority for a $15 minimum wage, which is explainable given that lots of the country, the median wage isn't even there. And in the same way, you see other topics where, how's Kamala Harris doing? And it turns out that, it's not so interesting to hear what Democrats think. She's doing great. Republicans think she's doing terrible. But then when you look at the racial breakdown, you can see sometimes interesting steps. And the same thing is on many other topics where sometimes you see this is a bipartisan issue. Everybody thinks that it should be done. Please act on it. And there's other cases where it's much more nuanced. So we enjoy the fact that people can, in the privacy of their home, interact with the app, do things, and then see that their voice is heard in the overall polls that we can publish, which is, we believe, a win-win for everyone. And in some cases, these polls also make it, to legislators who then think, oh, that's maybe something I should look at.
And something to be said about these polls as well is the articles that you put up about them are always very neutral. And I've seen that you've done a very good job of just presenting the poll, just saying, here's an issue that exists, here's the poll, this is what people think about it. And there's is not prone really to very much either side. It just seems like you're taking it as hands-off an approach about injecting your own opinions as possible, which I appreciate and is obviously very important. But the polls in particular, I thought, were very useful because of the sheer number of people sampled is very large as well, because a lot of actual professional polling companies tend to sample even fewer. I've certainly come across polls that have made very categorical statements with fewer people, and I think that with the number of people participating in your app, it's a better, more accurate picture. Perhaps, of course, there is the fact that it is a mobile app, and the number of younger people accessing it is probably going to be higher, just by merit of the form in which it takes. But you get a more accurate picture on the whole about the public opinion about a certain issue than you might otherwise.
Yeah, and we've done quite a bit of research. That's of course also my background in data science, is that we of course use poll weighting, which means that if we have a lower representation of older people, then their votes count a little bit higher than the ones we have overrepresented. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, by releasing it also as a website soon, we think that that balance will be evened out a little bit. There's more elderly people interested in politics who may like to do that from their desktop than maybe from their smartphone. We also weigh if somehow the balance between independents and Republicans and Democrats isn't perfectly aligned with what we want, although we have a good representation of both sides in the app. And we constantly we try to measure how we're doing in our polls. And because we're doing so many polls in parallel on races and policy questions, we are able, after every election, to determine what the quality of our poll is given our sample size. So we have some practical experience that shows that our polls are pretty accurate, and we're quite happy with that. And we expect with increased number of people joining, the accuracy will increase in the future. And in that sense, we hope that it's a good public service to be able to say, hey, this is what people really think about this topic. And the good news is it's free for everybody to participate. It's free for us to produce the poll. And that means that we are not beholden to anyone. We just like to bring this data out there because our ultimate goal is simply to inform people better on a non-partisan, factual basis, because that's kind of what our passion is.
And I very much appreciate the work that you're doing. Is there anything that perhaps I haven't touched on yet that you would like to mention?
No, I think that this is what we are and what we try to do. I think that the most important thing that we believe in is we would like everybody to be an informed voter. As it's someone who comes originally from the Netherlands, you've probably heard a little accent there. I believe that when I was young, there was, most elections, 80 or 90% of people, something in that order of magnitude, voted. It was all very simple to go and vote. I basically voted every single time I could for as far as I remember. And coming to the United States, I realized, that's not the case everywhere, and it's not in all elections. And why is that? And part of that is that people didn't know when they could vote or what people stood for. And we enjoy making that a little bit easier, because if everybody participates, democracies are stronger. That's kind of what we believe. So we hope to do our little thing in making democracy stronger by having everybody informed and then participate. And who did they vote for? Well, we don't care. As long as you thought about it, that's what democracy is. I don't have to agree with you. I want you to participate. That's it.
And I think that's a very good aim, and I wish you all the best. And thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, and I hope the app does very well, because I think it is a very good thing, and I encourage all of our viewers to take a look at it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for your time.